From To Keto LLC, it's Keto Woman Podcast with Daisy Brackenhall.
Hello Keto lovelies, I'm Daisy Brackenhall and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight, after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. Keto has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman Podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs to 20 grams or less per day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds and the incidental carbs you find in things like dairy. Moderate protein scaled to your lean body mass, and then fat to satiety. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalised keto. I'll be asking my guest each week what their keto looks like to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we can't give you medical advice. It's always best to work with your own doctor because they know you and your medical history and so have access to the bigger picture. Thank you, Kate Noto, Carolyn Ketchum, Annalie Fowler, Sarah Barnbrook, Cynthia Wood, Rebecca Smith, and Crystal Freisel for supporting me and this podcast by making a pledge at my Patreon page. Do you want to hear your name here at the top of the show? Are you enjoying this podcast and would like to help me make more episodes? Then head over to my Patreon page at patreon.com/Keto Woman or hit the support button on the Keto Woman Podcast website. It means a great deal to me, and you will get to headline the show just like Kate, Carolyn, Annalie, Sarah, Cynthia, Rebecca, and Crystal did today. I'm shaking things up a bit on my Patreon page, so look out for some new goodies appearing in the new year. This week, extraordinary woman Carrie Brown returns to have a chat about dealing with Christmas if you or someone you know suffers from depression. If you haven't listened to Carrie's previous episodes yet, check them out to find out more about her recovery from bipolar disorder and more recently Lyme disease. As is often the case, what I plan to talk about and what we end up talking about is somewhat flexible, and our chat today meanders around a few topics. Depression is an uncomfortable thing for many to talk about at a time when everyone is, or at least seems to be, in the party spirit. I hope you find it useful, and please don't be afraid to reach out for help if you're struggling to get through the holiday season. Even if sometimes you feel like you don't matter, you do. You really do. Much love to all you lovely listeners out there. Welcome, Carrie Brown, to a special pre-Christmas holidays podcast on the Keto Woman Podcast. How are you doing today?
Hello, Daisy. I'm doing great. I always have a great day when I talk to you.
Oh, that's nice. Me too.
It's like talking to an old mate.
Exactly. It's very comforting, isn't it?
Well, it is. Well, I suppose for both of us, because you're in France, surrounded by French people speaking French, and I'm surrounded by Americans, which I love, but still they're Americans, and so it's like it's kind of a bit like coming home talking to you, even though we're like across the other side of the pond from each other.
I know, and I saw you post in your kitchen group the other day that you'd been talking to a friend in the UK for a while, so you were talking particularly British after that. It does affect your accent, doesn't it, depending who you've been talking to?
Yes, I was talking to England. And I can't remember who I was talking to now, which is really weird because that doesn't happen very often. But anyway, I talked to England for a really long time. and it was awesome. And I'm pretty sure that I sounded a lot more British at the end of it than I did when we started.
Yes, it does work like that. I tend to be a little bit of a chameleon with that and pick up bits and pieces depending on the people you're talking to at the time.
For a couple of days, I was calling the trash bin rubbish and, things like that. Put it in the bin.
Yes, I notice a lot of your Americanisms now. There are a lot of things in your general speak that are much more American than British. But that's what happens, I guess, when you're living there and those are the words around you all the time. You just naturally start picking them up.
Well, I just think it's how you get on, because so British people, we all grow up watching American TV, but Americans don't grow up watching British TV. So British people are much better at knowing how to do American than Americans are at knowing how to do British. And so I found when I moved here that if I wanted to be understood and didn't have to explain myself every 5 minutes, I just used their phrases, their expressions, their words with my British accent, but with all of the American phrases and words. And that's kind of how it goes. So now I just use, I just use, so that's just so that I don't have to explain myself all the time. Like I don't have to explain 100 times over what rubbish is or what a bin is and I know a lot of Americans know some of the core things, like they know that the hood is a bonnet and the trunk is the boot, but there's a lot more different words that the British use that they don't know. And I just found it easier to use their words and phrases and call it good. It's
very funny, actually. That's one of those little light bulb moments that I hadn't thought about what the reason was for why, as Brits, we seem much better at those translations. And of course that's what it is. Of course it's TV as you're growing up. It's obvious. I'd never thought of it before, but that's why it is completely dependent on the television you watch. So, I can remember growing up and watching obviously the American films and programs, but also picking up all the Australian lingo as well because of watching things like Neighbours, and that is absolutely, isn't it, how you pick up those things and learn the translations. And if you're not watching them, you don't know.
And there's a lot less in Australia. There's a lot more Australians who grow up on British TV, but not so much in America. So, that's why we're better at being American than the Americans are at being British.
Absolutely. Now it all makes a lot more sense to me. Anyway, we are talking about the holidays.
Yay, holidays!
Yay, holidays!
Or whatever it is we're supposed to call them now.
Exactly. I guess, it's always going to be Christmas for me, even though I'm not religious and don't actually believe in the whole Christ behind Christmas thing personally, but it's just, for me, it's just a name for that time of year in the UK. I know particularly in America, it's a different holiday season. It really seems to start at Thanksgiving and sort of carry on from there. But there are so many different festivals that come into play this time of year, aren't there? I think that's why just calling it holidays is probably a good way just to encompass everyone and everything.
Yes, and I think you're right that in America there's so many more different cultures here than in England, but also there's Thanksgiving and that's the big holiday here, whereas in England everything revolves around Christmas. Like we really only have one big, we have Easter, but even that isn't anything like the scale that we do Christmas.
No,
but
Christmas is the biggie, isn't it? Yeah.
And that's when we get, everyone takes like 10 days off and there's public holiday, bank holidays everywhere. And so for me, like you, everything was about Christmas, even though I didn't grow up in a religious family either. I grew up in a household where we went to church for weddings and funerals. For me, it was all about Christmas because that's the big holiday. So for me, I've just, I spent my entire childhood saying Merry Christmas. And now it's like, well, now some people choose to be offended about that. And I'm like, it doesn't actually, it's just a nice greeting. Like, really, it's just a pleasantry. Like, you don't have to get bent out of shape about the fact that I said Merry Christmas and not Happy Holidays. However, having moved here, I can see how it's more, because there are so many more holidays here, and you don't know what the person you're talking to celebrates or doesn't or whatever, that it is just easier it feels more inclusive to say Happy Holidays rather than Merry Christmas. But I do still trip up. I had a blood draw yesterday, and as I left, I said to the lovely gal who took my blood, as I walked out the door, I said, I mean this in the nicest way possible, but I hope I don't see you again, because, who wants to go for blood draw? So I said, in the nicest way possible, I hope I don't have to see you again, but Merry Christmas. And I was just like, oh, I'm supposed to say Happy Holidays, but whatever. The other thing is that in America, the Americans get incredibly excited about every holiday. Like, they decorate for every holiday. Halloween's a huge thing. They redecorate their houses for every holiday. I mean, everything. And I have found it very, very difficult not to get sucked into that. And I don't mean that in any bad way at all. In fact, I've started to actually look forward to the change, every holiday. They decorate their houses and they wear green on St. Patrick's Day, and I've actually come to appreciate that and enjoy that. It's not really something I participate in. I don't wear green on St. Patrick's Day, but I love the enthusiasm and the excitement with which Americans embrace every holiday they possibly can. So Happy Holidays does seem more appropriate here. But
and it's nice to spread it, have some different festivities around the year as well, rather than having it all at one time of year. But I think it's just, when you grow up with something and it's a habit, it's so enshrined in, like you say, the words tumble out of your mouth without really thinking about them. And I think, a lot of things have changed in the last couple of years, where we're actually having to address some of those things and some of those phrases and words that tumble out of our mouths automatically. And we're having to start to think about how other people might react to those. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But I also don't think it's a problem that it just takes us a while to have a transition from one to the other and have to keep reminding ourselves, like you were saying, oh, I meant to say Happy Holidays, but Merry Christmas tumbled out. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's nice to be aware that we're trying to change it, to make sure that it's more inclusive and that we're not maybe offending someone by saying the wrong thing. I think that's a good thing, to be aware of that. I think probably people are forgiving of us if it takes a little while to get used to it.
Yeah, and I think that this, a lot of people, there's this furore. I don't know if it's reached France yet, but there's some people who have got their panties in a wad about the song Baby It's Cold Outside, which was written in 1940 something, and there's a bunch of people that are just getting really upset and said we shouldn't listen to it, and it's talking about date rape and blah 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 blah, and the rest of America is going, wait, what? Have you heard the music that's being written today, and you're okay with that, but you're not okay with this? What? But I think, and I'm like, but we got on with this stuff was never a problem. Why is it a problem now? I think one of the things is that the world has got so much smaller because we do travel. It's we're not as just in our little culture bubbles anymore. We do have to start embracing other cultures and being more inclusive because travel and the internet has made the world so much smaller in that we can touch all these things now, whereas before we couldn't. We were in England, and what was good for England was good, and we didn't think about the rest of the world because the rest of the world didn't touch us and we didn't touch them. But then with the internet and then travel, now all of a sudden it's like, well, actually we can't be insular. We can't just sit here and think, well, it's all about us. It's right and proper, in my opinion, that we should start embracing the other people and the other cultures that we touch now by virtue of the internet and travel. So, but I think that's why for 60 years, things like Baby It's Cold Outside weren't a problem, but now, maybe we do have to look at things in different ways. Of course, no, I don't think we should stop listening to it, but...
But, well, my perspective is on it, and there was a post in my group about that, and they were listing all the other things that should be banned because of that, and my first reaction was to laugh it off. And that post actually got flagged by somebody, and I had a discussion with them about it. And it opened my eyes as to how, okay, we're not necessarily saying this song has to be banned, but we're just having a conversation about actually this song that has been part of our culture. Think about the culture it was written in, the people maybe who wrote it, and some of the words and some of the phrases that are in it are actually potentially triggering people and hurting people, and we are in a different environment now. But I think it's not necessarily about saying what songs we should listen to, shouldn't listen to, what should be banned, what shouldn't be banned. It's having those conversations. It's like having the Me Too conversations. It's like having the different gender conversations, the race conversations, all those things. It's about having the conversations. And actually, for me, what I always benefit from is just opening my eyes to different points of view and actually having those little light bulb moments. Gosh, yes, I'd not thought about that. My first instinct was to laugh, but here I am hearing from somebody who was actually felt really unpleasant when they read that post, and it actually impacted them in a really negative way. So immediately that's just gonna alter my perception. I think that's a good thing. It's just about learning and appreciating other people, isn't it?
Yes. I just think that's hard.
Yes, it is hard. Very uncomfortable.
Some people would rather just carry on laughing and ridiculing because if they don't, they have to stop and think about, wait, maybe that is impactful, and that takes work. And we're humans, and for the most part, we don't like work. So it's easier to keep on keeping on with what you've done for your whole life or what you grew up with. But I do think, and I think maybe because this is the fourth country I've lived in, I think I've had an advantage in that I've been forced, right? I say that in air quotes because I chose to move those 4 times. So, but when I say, having made the decision to move, then if you want to get on well and be successful, you have to integrate into the society you're in. And so I've been exposed to a lot of different cultures and a lot of different views. And now I can see why we should try not to be lazy, and we should try to see it from the other person's point of view and maybe make a new decision, maybe not, maybe stick with where we were, but at least be open to learning why different cultures do things a different way, or how people that have had horrible experiences might come across something. So, but as humans, we're lazy, and it's easier not to do that because it's work. I have just been exposed to having to do the work because if I wanted to survive in wherever I happen to be living, then that's what I had to do. So I'm kind of grateful for that. I've been forced into not being lazy. Damn it.
Yes, exactly. And I think you're absolutely right. And that was, in a way, that was my first reaction when I had to start thinking about that post and what went with it. It was, oh, I don't have time for this, or I don't want to go down into this quagmire.
Just get over it. Just, why are you making a drama?
Yes, but the rest of me, the biggest part of me was, well, no, this is important, and yeah, suck it up. You're going to have to feel uncomfortable for a while. But ultimately, what comes out of it is that it's interesting learning about other people and how they feel, and the benefit you get from going through that brief period of feeling uncomfortable, I think, has so much value. And people who refuse to do that, in my opinion, are missing out.
I'm endlessly fascinated with why people do what they do, why people think. I love to see, it doesn't mean that I'll necessarily change my mind, but I love to see how someone sees something in a completely different way to me. I'm just endlessly fascinated with psychology and why people do and say what they do.
For sure. And I love to have things that I think, or I thought that I believe quite strongly in, challenged, because sometimes it does get changed. That's how I started low carb and keto, actually, from somebody challenging me and saying that I was talking a load of rubbish about carbs, which I was. And it was somebody really challenging me, but doing it in the kind of way that pulled me in and said, go and look at the science, and this is interesting. And because I had respect for her as well, it was just really a fascinating journey finding out about what she was saying and probably trying to prove her wrong and prove myself right, not being able to do so in the process. And look what a different path that sent me off on. So I think sometimes people can radically change what you think.
This is not at all what we were supposed to be talking about.
No, we've gone off on a bit of a ramble.
That was a brilliant segue into one part of what we were going to talk about, which was understanding and embracing the fact that not everybody feels merry and bright at Christmas or during the holidays, whatever we're going to land on calling it.
Yes, because there is that expectation, isn't there?
There absolutely is.
Happy holidays, Bon Fête is here. Everyone's supposed to be happy and having fun and feeling festive, and it's all, yeah, I hate it. Hate it is a strong word. That's not true, but I don't enjoy the festive season that much. I find it very difficult.
And there's a lot of people who do not feel merry and bright. And actually, there's a lot more people who do not feel merry and bright around the holidays. Rates of suicide are up at the holidays. Rates of reported depression, clinical depression, are up during the holidays. So actually, there are less people being merry and bright than more. And, our little discussion that we hadn't planned on perfectly points out that it will be really useful. I mean, I hesitate to say that we have to. I do think we have to, but we all have to make the choice to do it. But I think it will be incredibly helpful to mankind if people who do not suffer from depression or suicidal thoughts, it will be incredibly helpful if those folks could at least try and understand or embrace the fact that there's a lot of people that do struggle and how they can help it to not be such a difficult time for so many people. So having the conversation about mental health at the holidays, I think is incredibly important. Although anyone that knows me knows that mental health is my thing, I think it's incredibly important, and I think it's particularly important around this time of year.
And so, I suppose I think a good way maybe to approach this would be both sides. Would be how best to get through it as the person who's in the position of not feeling great at whatever level that is. And from the other side, with friends and family and people who know that person or suspect that someone they know, a loved one, feels that way, how best to help them through that time. Like I say, I find it difficult, and my way of dealing with that is generally just to sort of hide away and make particularly the day, Christmas Day, but the time around it just as sort of cozy and as nice as I can, and you know, cuddle my dogs and my cats and just try and do things that will make me feel relatively nice. I don't know. I don't really have a perfect strategy of getting through it. I'm not sure that there is one. But you know a lot more about this and have maybe thought more about it. I don't know. What are your feelings from both those angles about how best to get through this in one piece?
So as a sufferer or an ex-sufferer, Christmas, as we said at the beginning, Christmas has always been a huge thing for me. And when I was a kid growing up, it was the best time of the year. I mean, it really was. Those 2 weeks over Christmas and New Year.
Oh, the excitement. Yeah.
Right. Oh, the excitement was,
I can remember it.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It was the only time of the year that my brother and I had chocolate biscuits, cookies. It was the only time of the year we had candy, sweets, chocolates, crisps, you know, all of that. Like soda, like fizzy drinks. We never had that stuff during the year. We only ever had it. So, and not that food is everything, but it was, that 2 weeks was so different.
Yeah.
That it was this hugely exciting thing. And, you know, in England, the build up to Christmas is huge. And it's like, you know, we actually decorate our houses and, you know, do fun, different things. And
oh, exactly. And it starts at the beginning of December. And my birthday's in the first week of December. So that's when the weekend nearest my birthday, we'd get the tree and that would be decorated. And that, for me, that was, that's the beginning of Christmas. That's when it all starts kicking off. Or it did. And the excitement.
Yeah. So it's a huge, huge thing. And it's terribly exciting. And so that's what I grew up with. So historically, Christmas was always good for me. And then, you know, I got older and recreated that for myself. But then, so 12, I lose track, 12, 13 years ago, I don't talk about this a lot, but I was married and I became unmarried 12 or 13 years ago. And it wasn't so much the loss of, because I'm an introvert, so being alone is not an issue for me. So it wasn't loss of that. I think it was the loss of having someone to focus on or buying gifts for, or I don't know what it was, but when I have no family either, so I'm kind of in this little bubble of just me. And so 12 years ago, what I decided that I was going to do was I decided that I sat down and thought about, you know, what are the things that I really, really love to do? And my favorite things are driving. I know I should have been a trucker.
I know you're, yes, epic road trips. You should have been a
driving, going to see new places, exploring new places, and landscape photography. And so I decided that every year I was going to like open up the map and put a pin in it and say, I've never been there. Like, you know, I've never been to Yellowstone, or I've never been to Yosemite or Yosemite, as I used to call it. Or I've never been to Death Valley, or I've never been wherever. I've never been to Taos, New Mexico. And I would leave on around the 18th or 19th. I'd pack up my 4Runner and I would just go on this epic road trip. And so I would literally leave before Christmas kind of started, and I'd get back typically New Year's Eve, because I'd want to be home, so that I was with my kitties for the fireworks, because they're always terrified. So I always used to try and get home on New Year's Eve so that I was there for that. But that's kind of 10 to 12, 14 days. I would be out like discovering new places, driving, shooting new landscapes. I'd eat what I wanted, when I wanted. There was just like, and I would find that I wouldn't even realize which day was Christmas Day. I'd kind of literally just miss it. And for me, that works really, really well. So, and it also takes away, because I don't know about you, but for me, and I think for a lot of people, single people, or people who have families, but they're not really very connected with their families, or their families are toxic and they don't really like to hang out with them, which is perfectly fine, by the way. I think it can be that being invited to someone else's holiday celebration, someone else's Christmas particularly, is awesome. It's wonderful that people, open their arms and their houses to have you come and join them for what a lot of people is a very special time of year. But for me, I often feel worse when I'm in a group of people than when I'm actually on my own. I actually feel lonelier kind of being a gooseberry. And I don't know if Americans know that term or not, but I feel worse being a gooseberry on the kind of fringes of someone else's Christmas Day or Thanksgiving than I do if I was on my own. So while I always get a boatload of invitations, I'm like, I'm road tripping. I'm going, they said, what are you doing at Christmas? I'm like, I'm going to be in Taos, New Mexico. And so it actually made it okay to turn down all these lovely invitations, which came from the best intentions and the best hearts of, people that I love. But spending Christmas with another family is, I find, harder than being on my own. So road tripping was the way that I've handled it. And so that meant that the holiday period between, Christmas and New Year once again became my favorite time of year because I was focused on going off and doing the things I loved. The other thing that I've done in the past is over Thanksgiving, when I was working in corporate America, that there was that 10 days over that Thanksgiving week where Microsoft would kind of shut down. No one was there. So it was like, well, I might as well just have 10 days because nobody's going to be there anyway. But what I used to do was that was a cookbook writing 10 days. I wouldn't write the whole book, obviously, but that was when I would I'd be creating recipes like crazy. Like I'd do 5 to 7 recipes every day. So I had this massive project for that period of time, and everything would be focused on that project. And so again, it took away the invites from people that you don't want to turn down because you love them and you don't want to make them feel bad. But I'm like, wow, I'm working on a cookbook and I'm scheduled that day, and thank you very much, but I'm afraid I won't be able to. So it took that away, but it also kept the focus on something creative, which is I've always found incredibly good for stopping the emotional roller coaster. It keeps you focused on something. It keeps you busy. It's just, there's so much good things. So those are two strategies that I've used over and over and over again that have been really successful. Either having a really big creative project for me, it was Thanksgiving and it was writing cookbooks. And over the Christmas/New Year time, it would be road tripping, opening up the map. I've never been there. I'm going to drive there and I'm going to shoot it with a camera and discover new places. And so those are 2 things I've done to completely eradicate the word terror came to mind, but I'm not sure that's the right word. But for people who struggle with depression or people that are alone, either because they are single and have no family or because the family, that situation is not good, that's the way I've dealt with. There's 2 ideas for how I've dealt with the times very successfully, and I kind of breeze through them without even realizing, like, oh, it's Thursday. I was supposed to eat turkey today. or whatever.
Oh, that's fascinating, and it's brought a few things into place in my mind when we went from that earlier on, both sharing that and remembering that immense excitement that we used to feel as children at Christmas. And, I can remember knowing that I wasn't allowed to go in to open stockings until whatever time my mother had set. Was it 7 o'clock in the morning or something? And those were the days where there was nothing you could do. I think I had a tiny little radio that I turned on that I think the BBC might have come on at 5 o'clock in the morning, but before that there was nothing. So it was, maybe a book or something, but having to wait because you were so excited and you wanted that day to start, and that overwhelming feeling of excitement and joy and anticipation. And I think part of the problem, it's just sort of come home to me really, and it's obvious really, is that we're trying to recreate that. That's our standard. That's our benchmark for what we think Christmas should be. And of course, attaining that level is nigh on impossible. And I think to a certain extent, it does get recreated by people who go on to be parents and have those young children themselves, and then enjoy Christmas or that period of the year, the celebrations in that time. They enjoy it vicariously through those children and get that level of excitement again and experience it in a slightly different way. And I've seen that participating. Last year I was back in the United Kingdom. We thought, and it did turn out to be my stepfather's last Christmas, so it was really important to be there. But I got to see the excitement of those young children and get some of that excitement of the day again. And I think the trouble is if you don't have that, and like you were saying, it's very difficult. Some people can involve themselves in other people's Christmas and get enjoyment for that. But I feel the same as you do. I feel a bit like a gooseberry, and it just makes me think of what I don't have rather than I have in that moment, which is not really helpful for anybody. But I tend to sit at home focusing on what I don't have, and waiting for that phone call to hear from my niece and nephews or those kind of things. And so but that's what's just dawned on me with you were saying about focus. It's changing your focus to something else and having that project or something else to do. Yes, and putting something in place. This is what I'm going to do.
It's also planning, and I think planning, one, you can build the excitement if you know that this thing is going to happen, but also it means that you don't inadvertently wake up and you're sitting there waiting for your niece and nephew to call, or for whatever your scenario is. If you have a plan, when Christmas morning rolls around, you've already got a plan. You've pre-decided what you're going to do. You're going to, I don't know, it could be as simple as you're going to get up and take yourself off to the wildly expensive buffet at the fancy pants hotel or wherever it is, which is something you might never do, but you have a plan that you're going to go do that. So you get up and you get excited and you get dressed and you put your mascara on or whatever, and you go and have the fancy pants keto, of course, breakfast buffet for $45 or whatever it is. So I think planning is super, super important for folks who are either in a situation where they're alone at the holidays, for whatever reason, or people that struggle with being sad or depressed or even suicidal at the holidays. I think planning is really, really, really key. And as I say, for me, having these big plans, having a creative project to work on, having a schedule, it may sound dull, but trust me when I tell you that it's always worked out to be the absolute opposite of that. Because my Thanksgiving weeks, I've got to the end of the week and I've produced this amazing thing, or, I've got something to show for it. And and I've been so busy that I haven't really had time to think about what I don't have. And I've also been able to gracefully decline any invitations because I already had a commitment. The fact that the commitment was to myself was still a commitment. You know, a commitment to ourselves is as important as a commitment to someone else. Or going away. And so those for me have been hugely successful. And I think planning is important. So, you know, start thinking now about what you're going to do. And the other thing I'd really like to have people think about is don't be afraid to start your own traditions or develop your own family culture for how you deal with holidays. Because it might be that a lot of people in the family are secretly thinking the same thing. But because tradition and culture and family cultures can be so strong, like nobody wants to do it, but everybody keeps doing it because they've always done it. And everybody's afraid to say, why do we not do this year? Or why don't we do something else? Or, you know, one part of an extended family is too nervous to say, you know what, we're not coming this year. And so I would just encourage you all to think about, or if you're in a family, to sit with your family and go, you know, does this tradition actually work for us? Are we doing this because it's the best thing for us? Are we doing this because we enjoy it? Are we doing this because it's a positive thing? Or are we doing it purely out of tradition or habit or culture? And don't be afraid to start a new culture or a new tradition for your family, even if that's a family of one. You know, my tradition now, my culture is that over Christmas, I road trip. And so actually last year I didn't road trip, but that was the first time I hadn't road tripped. But that was because I randomly decided to move from Seattle to Connecticut. So I was busy getting the house ready for selling. I had a house to sell. I was ready getting the house ready to sell and packing and purging. And so I had this massive project all over Christmas. Don't even remember which day Christmas was, but I had this massive project. It wasn't road tripping for the first time, but I still had this massive project, and that just kept me occupied and busy. And of course I was excited about the move, and I always find purging incredibly beneficial. I feel like my brain clears out when I clear out my environment.
Oh, and the weight lifted. Yeah, when I'm dreadful for writing things on scraps of paper, and I just collect them, and then it just becomes this overflowing mass. And it just stresses me out looking at it. And when I do deal with it, it's like a weight lifted. And I love what you were saying about having a project, and what you were saying twofold in my mind. It came in thinking about when you were saying it, so you get that real sense of achievement and fulfillment for having completed that project that you set yourself. But also I can see it being a great reminder, because when we start doing these new things and trying to form these new habits, it doesn't always work perfectly the first time. And it's something that takes a bit of practice, but I can really see how that's going to help for the following year, seeing those, you know, so with you, the lovely landscape pictures from your road trip, or all the new recipes that you created. That's going to be a really good motivation for helping you plan the following year. So I think that's a great idea, and I'm going to try that.
One of the reasons that I suggested that you might want to look at whatever habits or traditions or cultures you and your family have is because I remember when I was still in corporate America, and way back when, before keto and low carb and all of that, on the Thanksgiving, what I used to do was I would go to Redbox and get 6 movies, and I'd roast a turkey on the Wednesday night. And on Thursday morning, I'd make an enormous pile of turkey and cranberry sauce sandwiches, which is like my favourite food ever. And I'd make this enormous pile of sandwiches, and I'd get my 6 movies, and I'd get my 6 cats, and we would literally spend all day on Thanksgiving on the couch eating turkey sandwiches and watching movies. Which for anyone who knows me knows that, like, I barely even know where my television is. Like, I'm just not a TV watcher or a movie watcher. So this was like an extraordinary day for me. But it was something that I didn't really look forward to. I mean, it wasn't traditional at all. It was turkey sandwiches and movies. But for me, that was really different. And to spend an entire day relaxing, just hanging out, watching movies on the couch was like such a delicious thing, because I never did it. And so this was years back, before I started road trips and keto and all of that. But that became my Thanksgiving tradition. That was how I did Thanksgiving. And the following week, when we'd all go back to work and we'd all share, oh, hey, how was Thanksgiving? And I would tell people what I did. Almost everybody, as long as we were just one-on-one in my office or whatever, every single person would say, wow, that sounds great. I wish I'd done that. And I'm like, so what did you do? And they'd say, well, we had blah, 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 blah. And I had a stream of people who were like secretly wishing that they had just hung out, with their pets or their spouse and kids, and a pile of sandwiches and a bunch of movies, and just chilled out all day. And so that's when I started thinking, so why don't you? Be brave. If it's not working for you, if you're just doing it to keep other people happy, or you're just doing it because it's tradition, or sit down with your family or with yourself and go, does this actually work for me? Because if it doesn't, then I'm going to create something that does. So that's why I just would like to encourage you all to examine why you do what you do, and if it's actually working for you. And if it's not, don't be afraid of just making your own tradition up, and something that serves every member of your family. Maybe you have some introverts and some extroverts, and maybe you can, if you're in a family unit, maybe you can split yourselves in half, and dad and X number of kids like to go hiking, they go off for a hike, and just don't be afraid to figure out what works for you now and do that. And I think you'll find that a lot more people will struggle a lot less if they do that.
Yes, it's a good point. And I can see even maybe taking turns, if you have a family unit where you all want something completely different, is maybe doing it differently each year. And you might actually, you will learn something about each other, and might find, that you end up forging a tradition that does end up suiting everyone. It's a fascinating idea to just potentially shake it up. Not if you don't, perhaps you absolutely all love the way it is, and you love the traditional day, and that's great. But I think it's a really interesting idea just to have that conversation, because like you say, everyone might just be thinking we'd like to do something different. What about, I think we've kind of probably covered it really by just showing how people might be feeling this time of year, but is there any tips you would give to people who do really enjoy this time of year, or are either come across someone they feel isn't and they might want to help them out, or they have a friend or a relative that they know doesn't enjoy this time of year? What strategies would you offer them with how to help their loved one get through it?
So I think people that don't struggle with depression or suicide thoughts, I think that a lot of them find it really difficult because they don't know what to do with this. And I think part of that is that they're scared of doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing or being in over their heads. And it's also difficult in that if you don't understand the difference between a clinical depression and a situational depression, or someone that's just sad, then it can be very frustrating to have this miserable person kind of hanging around. So I think the first thing I would like to encourage people that don't suffer is to just try and get an understanding that a clinical depression or, suicidal thoughts, it's like having a broken leg. It's not something that we can't just go, oh, I'm going to toss my crutches away and walk because, I'm just going to get over my broken leg. You can't think your way out of a clinical depression any more than you can think yourself out of a broken leg. So, or if you're diabetic, I'm just not going to have that diabetic coma. I'm just not going to do it. Or I'm just going to wake up, just wake up out of that coma. It's, you know what I mean? It's just, a lot of people ask us to do the impossible by snapping out of it, or it's not something that we have control over. So I think it's super important if people would try and understand what it's like for people that struggle with clinical depression or suicidal thoughts, if they could just understand that it's not something that we have control over, and then give us space. And so for me, when I wasn't, I think everybody knows that my bipolar I haven't had any symptoms of bipolar for over 3 years. So this is kind of in the past for me. But when I was there, it was the thing that helped me most, I think, was having 2 or 3 close people who understood and who realized that when I was having a difficult time, I didn't actually necessarily need anything, just to go and hang at their house, just like go and sit in the corner at their house, just to not be alone was incredibly helpful. But I think the mistake that a lot of people who don't suffer make is that they think they have to entertain you or try and cheer you up or try and do something. And we actually don't need you to do anything. We just need someone to be there and not judge us. So there were times where I would call my girlfriend or I would text her and I'd say, I'm having a really difficult day. And obviously there were times she wasn't able, but when she was able, she would just okay, I'll be over. And she would show up with Thai coconut soup from the takeout and a Red Box movie in her pajamas with a quilt. And she'd just show up and we wouldn't talk about it. She was just there. And we would just eat soup and then we'd go hang out on the couch and watch a movie. It was just her being there that was important. It wasn't that we didn't have to talk about it. She didn't have to try and bring me out of myself. She didn't have to try and cheer me up. There was no pressure on her. She just had to be there and know that I was having a hard time and not put any pressure on me to change, do anything, be anything. You know what I mean? She was just there. So I think being there is just possibly the most useful, powerful thing that you could do for someone who's struggling, and take off of yourself any need to try and fix us.
Yes, don't take responsibility for anything. Yeah.
Yeah, don't take responsibility. And so there were other times where I would text her and I'd say, can I just come and be at your house? And she'd go, of course. And I'd show up and we wouldn't necessarily even talk to each other. I would just, clamber on the couch. Her kids would be watching whatever. I would just clamber on the couch in the corner and quietly and just be there. And that most of the time was all that I needed. So I think friends and family can, because they love us and because they're trying to help, because they want to help us, but they think that they have to do these big, enormous things to try and do that. And you really, in my experience, don't. Just being there for someone and the other thing that I thought of the other day was, I don't think, and this might sound a bit woo-woo, and it doesn't matter what you call it, whether you call it the universe or God or, whatever you call that higher power. in my experience, if I get a thought about something, anything, if a person pops in my head, I don't think that's ever random. So if I suddenly start thinking about someone, I have trained myself that I might text a heart emoticon, or I might say, hey, I was just thinking about you, or I might call them, but I've learned not to ignore random prompts about things. And I think that can be really, really helpful for people who are suicidal or depressed, that just knowing that someone is there, it doesn't have to be a big thing, but and I think so often we have these thoughts about people and we go, oh, she's busy, I won't call her now. And then we forget, or, oh, we just brush it off. But I think that those prompts from wherever you think they come from, it doesn't really matter. I think they're really important. So I'd like to encourage people, everybody actually, is if you get a thought like that about someone, just act on it. And it doesn't have to be huge or big or take a lot of time. It takes literally 3 seconds to text an emoticon, or to say, hey, I was just thinking about you, hope you're okay, love you, bye. That can be literally life-changing. Literally life-changing.
I really agree with that. I've had such a big smile on my face when people have done that to me. And yeah, hey, I was just thinking about you, or yeah, something, just to know that people do think about you sometimes and people care. Mm-hmm. And just like you say, just that one emoji or that one sentence or those few words, it really does make a big, big difference.
For someone who's swimming in a sea of depression or despair that they have no control over. So let me be clear about, I'm not talking about, as terrible as it is, my puppy died, or whatever, situational depression where there's a reason for being sad. I'm talking about clinical depression where it makes no sense that you're depressed. You just are. And it's, as I say, it's like having diabetes or a broken leg. There's nothing you do about it. It can literally be that little insertion of someone in your life, like a phone call or a text or just a thing saying, hey, I was just thinking about you, can almost like pop us back to reality. Even if it's for a moment, that might be all it takes to get us back from the ledge. And so I'd really like to encourage everyone to, if you have a thought about someone, act on it. And the other thing, and I know there's memes all over the internet about this. There's that old adage that, be kind because you don't know what someone else is going through. It really, really, really is true. There have been, before I figured out my bipolar and keto and all of that, I would show up at work and I would be suicidal, but it's kind of, you can't let people at work know that, because one, it's not fair, and two, that's not a career enhancing move. And so, nobody would know. And the emotional pressure of having to hide that all the time is absolutely staggering. I mean, the effort involved in having to put on a game face is absolutely huge. And so I just, nobody knew. Nobody at work had any idea how I was struggling inside. And so it really is. And I think particularly during the holidays when we're supposed to be merry and bright, and so we do, because we don't want to let the side down and we don't want to be the Grinch and we don't want to be all that. And so the pressure on us to be merry and bright is even greater than normal. And at the same time, there's a lot more people that are suffering silently So that adage right now is that, be kind because you don't know what someone's going through. It really, really, really is important. We are surrounded by people who are battling, and I mean really battling for their lives, and we have no idea. So be kind. Always be kind, because you really, really don't know what might be going on for that person, and what just a little bit of kindness can make the hugest difference. It doesn't have to be this big magnanimous thing. It can be just a small little gesture can make the hugest difference to someone who's struggling with mental health issues.
It really can. And we haven't spoken much about it, well, at all about it, and we are coming to the end of the show now, but I do think it's important just to touch on how important, if you possibly can, and I know it's can be difficult to stay on track, but staying keto really does help keep you afloat during times that there's a lot of pressure coming in, and it that in itself, I certainly find, can be what makes the difference. And I went out for dinner on my birthday, and it was predominantly keto, but not completely. And the next night I also had some chocolates. And because it wasn't that much, I didn't go completely out of ketosis, but I dropped down the levels out of the levels where I do best at. And I woke up feeling awful. I woke up feeling like somebody had died. And there was no reason for it. But that just shows how quickly that change in the way I eat affected my mood. And of course, I just went back to eating the way I should, and actually within a day or so that picked back up. But it just goes to show that if you throw that massive spanner in the works and you go off plan and you're already feeling a bit vulnerable at that time of year, that can be something that is going to plummet you right down. And I know it isn't always possible, and I don't want people to get too stressed about it, and I certainly don't want people to punish themselves if they do go off plan. But just to be careful, because it's just that extra thing, isn't it, that's really going to impact your mood.
It really can. Sugar and things that turn into sugar after you've eaten them can absolutely play havoc with your brain. And so I think if you already are one of those people that struggle, and if you're one of those people that struggle more at this time of the year, really, I would encourage you to do the very best you can to limit your sugars and things that turn into sugar once you've eaten them to zero. I think it's a very, very slippery slope. And I think it's a lot more difficult for people with mental health issues to get back on track once we've gone off. But in my experience, it will make you feel worse, and you're already at risk. You're already suffering. It will, again, in my experience, because I know everybody's different, but in my experience, you will feel better if you stay away from the carbs. But it's probably when you're feeling down is probably when you get the cravings more.
Exactly. That's the problem, isn't it? That's one of the reasons actually why I'm glad I'm not in that environment. So like you were saying earlier about feeling a little bit of an outsider in somebody else's event, or just not necessarily wanting to go to those sorts of days for whatever reason. But one of the benefits of that is that you're not putting all that temptation in front of you, because I know absolutely. So if I'm feeling at a little bit of a low ebb, I go to an event like that and all that food's out in front of me, it's going to take some Herculean effort for me not to have some of that. Even though I know how I'm going to feel the next day, it's going to be really difficult. So the easiest way to deal with that is not to put the temptation in front of me in the first place. I know that's not always possible, but it's tricky.
But again, the key to success here is planning. Plan. Either plan not to go to things like that because you're busy doing your creative project, or you've left, you've gone off and you've gone somewhere else. But if you are at home, plan. Make sure you have no garbage in the house. Make sure that you have all of your favorite keto things in the house, and if you have to splurge and spend a bit of extra money to get the things that really, really float your taste buds from a keto perspective, do that, because you're worth it. You're worth the money to get you through, whatever it takes to get you through. Do that. And if you do need to, for me, I'm probably going to be home this year, which is going to be weird, but there it is. I may well go and get myself some foie gras because I love it. It's my favorite thing to eat on earth. I would never normally spend that kind of money, but it will, it's incredibly, liver is incredibly nutrient dense, but it will stop me feeling like there's nothing, or, do you know what I mean? Like that can be my little celebration, and I can get myself super excited about, today's the day I get to cook with foie gras, or, whatever it is. Don't be afraid to get all your favorite keto things in. Don't be afraid to splurge a little bit extra, maybe on something you wouldn't do normally, or go out for a meal that someone else is cooking, that keto, obviously. Whatever it takes to get you through, do that, because you're worth it, and you're important, and you have value in this world, and we don't want to lose that value. So I can't stress highly enough how important it is to avoid all the carbs if you are struggling with mental health issues. It will make a huge difference, but I also know how hard that is. So as Daisy said earlier, if you do slip, don't beat yourself up about it. Just get back to keto and keep on going.
Absolutely. And, we talk about staying at home and doing things special for yourself at home. But of course, you can take those goodies and treats with you. If you are going to an event or a family gathering or whatever it is, and you don't want to make a fuss, ask people to cook special things for you, you just slot into there. Take those treats with you and enjoy those. And when you've got something lovely in front of you, you're going to be less tempted by those other things that are around. And that is certainly, I would have thought, at least likely to help.
Indeed. Planning is key.
Planning is key. And I think, well, we've had lots of tips. I don't know if you've got any particular one special tip to round off today.
Be kind.
Be kind and plan.
Be kind and plan. Yeah, be kind and plan. And know that you have value. Even when you think you don't. You do. Don't lose sight of that.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
And if you do lose sight of it, ask somebody to remind you.
Yes. Because there are people who care. There are people who care in real life that you can reach out and touch, but there are people online as well, and there are groups, and there are all sorts of things. So there really are places where you can get that love and support when you're feeling like there isn't enough
Well, I hope that's helped. I hope it's helped people who don't suffer to be able to be better equipped to help those of us who do. And I hope that the people who do suffer feel like maybe they have permission to do something different, do what helps them, rather than always having to think about putting on a game face and doing whatever to make sure everyone else is happy. Because yes, making other people happy is a good thing, but not at the expense of your health and or your life.
Absolutely.
And you know, if it comes down to keeping yourself alive, I don't give a frick what, if anyone thinks I'm being selfish when I'm busy trying to keep myself alive, I couldn't care less. And for the same for anyone else that is in a clinical depression or suicidal, it's all about them, and it should be, because, you know, we need to keep them alive. So that's, yeah.
Yes.
If you're in crisis, be selfish. You have our permission.
For sure. I hope it's had some uplifting moments and given people some optimism for having happy holidays. It's, you know, don't feel the pressure to feel like you have to, but hopefully we've offered a bit of advice for how you can make the most of it and still have a good time.
And I think you just pinpointed something right there, was like, just the act of feeling like you have to can make it harder to just let it naturally happen. So hopefully, if we've relieved the pressure of having to be merry and bright, will actually help you to be more merry and bright. Yes. Because the pressure of having to perform has now gone. I hope that even that is helpful, that, you know, it's okay if you're not merry and bright. And it's okay to find a way to make yourself happier and brighter in whatever way works for you. And I hope that just, you know, giving you permission to do those things is helpful in you being able to enjoy this time of year more.
Yes, and as a little aside to that, I'd love to hear about it. So if anyone does come up with some new and exciting projects, show us the results. We'd love to see your equivalents to road trips or your new cookbooks. It's I think it'd be very interesting to see what people come up with.
That I would love to see people's, you know, merry and bright holiday projects that have absolutely nothing to do with traditional, the way you spend a holiday. I would love to see what you'll come up with or I would love to hear about the result of your family council where you sit down and go, hey, you know, this is going to be our tradition, or, you know, we're going to change the culture of holidays in our house and this is what we're going to do. And, you know, I would love to hear about the new traditions that you and your families create for the holidays. I would love that.
Yeah, me too. Well, we'll look forward to that. Thank you. Thank you very much for chatting to me again. It's been a pleasure as always. And I'm sure I'll be speaking to you over the Christmas holidays, probably on Christmas Day itself, I imagine.
And maybe even tomorrow.
Yes, most likely. Well, thank you very much, Carrie.
All right, love. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye. To get the resources and links from the show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you want to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. If you fancy joining me on this exciting adventure and want to help me create new episodes, please go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/ketowoman or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman podcast website. It's thanks to the two keto dudes that I'm hosting this podcast, so please consider heading to their Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com and help them bring you more podcasts like this one. Please help other people hear about and find this podcast by reviewing the show on iTunes and Facebook. Every star and review really does help. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. This week's end quote seems to be one of those unattributable ones which you know irks me, but still, it's the perfect one for today. In a world where you can be anything, be kind. Bye-bye, Keto Lovelies.